I was still in college when this happened. I went to a big party school in upstate New York. I wasn't in a sorority, but I attended a lot of the frat parties. I had a heavy drinking phase in college, unfortunately, but I guess it's good that I got it out of my system. There was an upcoming frat party that my friends, Deanna and Kayla, wanted to go to. I was not one to ever say no to a party unless I was already deathly hungover. And even then, sometimes I'd still go out. I was living in a house off campus with 3 other girls. We weren't a sorority or team house, just 4 friends renting a place together. I believe it was a Kappa Sigma party we were going to. The house was about 20 minutes away from campus. We pre-gamed pretty heavily before calling an Uber, which we all split. On the ride there, we kept drinking. A recipe for disaster. By the time we arrived at the party, I was borderline blacked out. I barely remember the layout of the house. I'd never been to a Kappa Sigma party before, and to this day, I have only vague flashes of memory from that night. I remember a group of frat guys standing out front, a DJ in the living room, and 2 beer pong tables in the kitchen. I was later told that I played beer pong with some random frat guy and ended up talking to him in a corner for a big chunk of the night. But after that, nobody knows where I went. I couldn't even tell you the last thing I remembered before waking up. I came to lying on the grass on the side of a road, dazed. My head was throbbing, and I had to still be somewhat intoxicated. It was pitch black outside. I was lying by a wooded area, away from the university. There wasn't much up there besides trees and the occasional little town. A couple of light posts stood further down the road, so I wasn't in complete darkness. I patted my pockets, searching for my phone, and had a meltdown when I realized they were empty. My crossbody bag was gone. I had absolutely nothing on me. Panic set in. I couldn't even call for help, let alone check the time or figure out where I was. I looked around, but there was nothing nearby. My white shirt was stained with dirt. But that was the least of my worries. I started walking toward the light post, slowly realizing there were no buildings in sight. I was on some completely random back road. I leaned against a pole, trying to figure out what to do. I decided to wait for a car to pass by and ask for help. It took a long time, at least 15 minutes, before I noticed headlights down the road. I stepped onto the pavement, waving my arms and jumping to ensure they saw me. The car slowed to a stop. A man inside rolled down the window and asked if I was all right. I told him I was stranded without a phone and needed a ride home. He told me to get in. I hesitated, but ultimately got in, thanking him profusely. As he drove, he asked how I ended up stranded. I told him I was at a party, and the next thing I knew, I had woken up on the side of the road. In hindsight, I should have kept it vague. I shouldn't have let him know I was vulnerable. He asked why I didn't call for help, and I explained that I lost my phone. He looked at me strangely. That was when I really took in his appearance. He looked about 35, with a thin goatee and a big nose. I gave him my address, and he put it into his GPS. As he started driving, I heard him mutter under his breath, "Okay, here we go." Something felt off. I asked how far we were, and he said, "About 20 minutes." That sounded right. Our house was about that far from the frat house. But as we drove, the road stayed the same. Dark, lined with trees, no signs of town. It felt like we had been driving longer than 20 minutes. I glanced at him out of the corner of my eye, and noticed something else. He kept looking at me. Not subtly either. He would turn his whole head to stare at me for a few seconds before looking back at the road. My stomach churned. I asked if he had put the right address in. He said, yes. Then, in his soft, almost whispery voice, he asked, "What color underwear are you wearing?" At the same time, he placed a hand on my knee and started rubbing it. I jerked away, my voice shaking. "Please don't hurt me. I just want to get home safe." "Why would I hurt you?" He replied smoothly. Then, without warning, he pulled onto the grass on the side of the road and put the car in park. He started leaning toward me, reaching his arms out as if to grab me. I didn't let him. I yanked the door handle, threw the door open, and ran into the woods. My air forces made it easier to sprint through the underbrush. I only ran far enough to get out of sight, then crouched behind a tree, covering my mouth to silence my breathing. For the first time, his voice wasn't soft. He shouted into the woods, "Where you at? I just want to..." I didn't hear the rest. My heart was pounding too loudly. I squeezed my eyes shut and stayed frozen. Then a car door slammed. Tires screeched against the road. I waited a little longer before creeping back out, scanning the road to make sure he was truly gone. I felt helpless. I didn't want to risk running into him again. But I needed someone else to help me. I waited just at the edge of the woods for another car to come. Eventually, one did. This time, I made sure it was a different car before stepping out and waving my arms. The driver was another man, a little older, but something about him felt safer. I sat in the back seat this time. I was so shaken up that I barely spoke, only answering his questions about what had happened. Thankfully, he dropped me off at my house. It was around 4 a.m. when I got there. My friends were still awake, waiting for me. They had my phone and my bag. They were about to call the police if I hadn't returned by morning. No one knew who I left with. No one knew how I ended up on the side of the road. The guy I was last seen with at the party claimed he wasn't the one who took me. There's no proof that I left with anyone at all. But that leaves no explanation for how I ended up there. After that night, I cut back heavily on drinking. I never want to be in a situation again where I have to hitchhike to survive. It was a rainy night, and I was driving home from my shift at the late-night diner I work at. It was a quiet shift at work. I had a weird amount of energy still, so I knew I was going to have to pop a melatonin when I got home. I was driving my usual route, a scenic road during the day, but majorly dark at night, lacking many light posts. There's the occasional little parking lot with cute little strips of stores or family-owned restaurants and shops, and then just stretches of nothingness. And by nothingness, I mean forest. Obviously, I was passing one of the aforementioned parking lots of a well-known deli, and under a light post was a woman standing out in the rain with her arm held out. She was waving me down. I slowed as I realized it was a slightly older woman who appeared to be in her mid-50s maybe. This woman was really tall, like 5'11" or 6 feet, but very skinny. I lowered my window and yelled, "Do you need a ride?" She came over to the front door and opened it, chanting how much of a hero I am. I asked where she was heading, and she said, "Just up the road to town." She was soaking wet, getting my car all wet. But I like to think of myself as a good person, and I couldn't, in good conscience, leave another woman out there in the cold rain. However, picking up a random man, on the other hand, would be a different story. The woman seemed sweet, but I noticed as I looked at her while talking to her that she was missing a few teeth. Very, very off-putting. I had to now wonder if she were homeless. She didn't smell or look like a homeless person though, but the rain soaking her and her clothes could have been masking any scent temporarily. Plus, her hair was so wet that what may have usually been scraggly, undone hair could now have been weighted down and straightened by the water. Either way, the woman was smiling the whole time and didn't seem like a threat. We pulled up to an intersection with a gas station on one corner. I pulled in next to a pump. Might as well fill up. I asked her if she wanted anything from inside. I was really doing my good deed for the week, she said. No thanks, honey. So I went inside to pay the attendant for gas and some spiked seltzers since tomorrow was the weekend. When I got back to my car, the woman was gone. I looked around the gas station lot real quick, but it was tiny. She was gone. She must have run off somewhere. I felt slightly bad, feeling like she was some lost, helpless woman, but part of me also felt slightly relieved. I filled up the tank of my SUV and was on my way home. When I got back to the house, I went straight inside my apartment, which is the first level of a 2-family house. There's a tenant upstairs and me. The front door into the foyer was usually left unlocked. Then the 2 doors leading to each apartment were locked. I let myself in, out of the rain, and into my apartment. I set the seltzers down on the counter. I wasn't that tired yet, so I took a melatonin and tried to go to bed. Even with the melatonin, though, I was having a hard time sleeping that night. My mind was kind of going wild with thoughts. A lot of thinking about that woman I picked up earlier and what happened to her. At certain points, I heard slight sounds from outside of my bedroom, but I dismissed them as sounds from the upstairs tenant. Boy, do I wish I was more suspicious before falling asleep. I woke up in my dark bedroom, something that usually would never happen when I take a melatonin. I usually sleep like a baby through the night. I sat up, feeling drowsy, feeling really thirsty too. I reached over the table next to my bed for my water. And then I saw and heard something across the room from me. I saw someone crouched in the corner of my bedroom behind a clothing dresser with their legs folded. I had to be hallucinating it. I shook my head violently and made weird noises. I even slapped myself in the face. And now, whoever was in the corner stood up and walked out of the room. I didn't scream. I didn't say a word. I sat in my bed in literal shock. The part that had me questioning my sanity for a bit after the figure was gone was that there wasn't a single sound from outside the room after this. No footsteps, not the sound of a door closing. I grabbed my phone and called my dad. He picked up, confused why I was calling so late. I told him what I had just seen, and he said, "Trish, you probably just had a night terror." I stayed on the phone with him as I was continuing to become more awake, and I left my room and turned on the lights to the living room outside. It was a small space. There was no one in there. I looked around the entire space and could confirm no one was there. I started to believe that maybe I did just hallucinate it. But still, I slept with the bedroom door locked that night. When I woke up in the morning, I drank some coffee and got dressed for the gym. I went to open the door to the foyer and realized it was already unlocked. My heart sank. Last night, what I saw. Was it real? I did another look around the apartment, confirming no one was inside. I went out to my car and opened the back door to put my gym bag in the back seat. And that's when I noticed the damp, yellow-brownish stains all over the floor in the back. And my blanket that I always had back there was gone. I wanted to cry or scream. I figured it out. That woman snuck into the back seat last night when I was in the gas station. She either somehow unlocked the door to my apartment, or I mistakenly left it unlocked. I called my dad again, frantically asking him what to do. He said, check and make sure nothing was stolen. And if nothing was, then calling the police really wouldn't do anything. I checked the house and didn't find anything to be missing, just my blanket from the car. I skipped the gym that day. In fact, I stayed bottled up in my apartment for a while after that. I was just genuinely disturbed. I didn't want to live there for much longer after that. And so, after that month, I found a new place to live. I was hitchhiking from Leipzig, Germany to Paris when I met him. He was a French man, somewhat dirty and unshaven, small and shabby. He agreed to give me a ride to Paris, where I needed to pick up my paintings from an exhibition. It was October. I was 29 years old, and he seemed about the same age. He spoke broken English. I spoke no French at all. I had no clue who this guy was. The day was mild, sunny, and blue. A warm and comfortable French afternoon, perfect for hitchhiking. It was around 4:30 p.m. when I met him at a gas station somewhere in France. I hopped into his little old car, happy to have scored a ride. We set off toward Paris on the main highway. After some small talk about where I was from, he reached over my lap and opened the glove compartment. He pulled out what looked like a bunch of passports. Then he handed them to me. The first belonged to a pretty girl. "She was my girlfriend," he said. "She died falling off the back of my motorcycle. The second belonged to another young woman. Died in a car crash," he told me. The third girlfriend had succumbed to a brain tumor. The fourth had fallen off a horse. "I'm such an unlucky man," he said. I nodded, uneasy. The uneasiness only grew as the miles rolled on. He was carrying 4 passports from dead women. Soon after, he announced he wanted to take a shortcut to Paris. It wasn't really a question. I assumed we'd cut through charming French villages, past houses and farms. Instead, we turned onto an implausible dirt road off the main highway. I thought. Not good. At first, the road wound through an open field, rolling over the vivid green French hillside. Then, we entered the heavy woods. The road narrowed, and the forest swallowed us in darkness. "I don't want to speak English anymore," he suddenly announced. It was not a request. Then, silence. Uncomfortable silence. I felt the first trickle of adrenaline in my body. My fight or flight instinct was waking up. The sun was fading. The woods grew darker. He seemed tense, lost in deep thought. I noticed his lips moving slightly, as if muttering something. Rigid, snake-like. My hand crept toward the car door handle. A movement I knew he couldn't miss. The car was slowing down. Was I going to die now? Did he have a gun? These questions spun through my mind. My life had turned surreal. This was not my plan. Then something primitive transpired between us. Maybe he sensed my shift, my readiness to fight. I was big and strong then, road tough from my travels. I knew I wouldn't beg. There would be no cries for mercy, not to him. I had my own secret store of rage. A quick, silent calculation passed between us. Could he take me? Was it worth it? The car slowed to a near stop. My pulse pounded. Then, suddenly, he accelerated. Out of the woods. The road widened. The highway appeared. Small houses flickered across the landscape. I had no idea where I was, but I could hear the rush of cars. The man turned to me. Do you want to spend the night at my house? We could have dinner together. A quick film reel of a filthy torture chamber basement ran through my mind. No, I said. My first word spoken since his order not to speak English. I truly believe that if I had broken that silence in the woods, if I had shown fear, begged, or spoken too soon, my story might have ended differently. Maybe one of the faces in those passports had begged. Maybe that had fed the killer's darkness. Who really knows? I got out at the side of the highway, watching him drive away into the settling night. I never went to the police. I didn't speak French, and I wasn't sure if my imagination had played tricks on me. I yelled something into the sky, wondering what the hell had just happened. Then I collapsed by the road, exhausted, and slept. The next morning, I woke up, staring at my hands. I was still alive. Jump ahead 20 years. I'm in a cafe in Leipzig, teaching a German business student English. We talk about hitchhiking. I tell him my story. He whips out his smartphone and Googles French serial killers. Then he shows me a picture. It was him, Patrice Allegre. I had never forgotten his face. Back in 1990, a serial killer was leaving bodies along the French roadsides and highways. He was in the middle of his killing spree when I met him. My French girlfriend had warned me about a killer on the loose, but I had been too naive. I've often wondered if the murdered women, and perhaps other men, were buried in those woods we drove through so slowly. I now wish I had gone to the police. I have since tried. But he is in jail now, and they are no longer interested. Maybe I could have stopped more murders back then. That weighs heavy on my soul. And since that day, I have felt the dark light in my body. Maybe the souls of those girls escaped with me, desperate to get out of the forest. This happened a few months ago, and I don't know why I agreed, but I decided to go with my friend Michael to a house party he was attending during our first year of high school. Even though I wasn't invited, Michael was able to pull some strings, and I accepted the invitation. Knowing that I wouldn't be able to drive, I made the choice to go with Michael. When we arrived at the home late at night, Michael told me to leave my phone in the car. He explained that maybe I could lose it or someone I didn't know could try and take it from me while I wasn't looking. At first, I was confused, but I simply nodded, and we got out of the car. I went with Michael into the home, more specifically the backyard, where the party was taking place. I glanced around the backyard and saw people engaging in various activities such as smoking, drinking, and possibly even doing drugs in small groups. Michael had encouraged me to go mingle and say hello to a few people. After a few hours, I realized I had way too much to drink because my vision was completely foggy. After getting closer to the house, I leaned against the wall to support myself. As I did so, I noticed the time on my watch indicated that it was either midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. I knew it was time to leave, so I set out to find Michael, and despite my overwhelming need to collapse, I scanned the yard for him. However, I was unable to locate him. When I asked a few others if they'd seen Michael, they all said they had not. I decided to call Mike to find out where he was. So I reached inside my pocket to feel for my phone, but it wasn't there. I cursed myself in the back of my mind because I realized that I had left my phone in Michael's car, which had disappeared with him. I realized there was only one way to get home, which was walking. Because I remembered my house wasn't too far from this house. The night was chilly because it was fall. I thought about just asking someone else to take me home. But I didn't know anyone else that could help, so I stuck with my idea of walking home in the darkness by myself. I then got to the road and started stumbling down the street. I knew I had too many drinks because I felt lightheaded and dizzy. A few minutes later, I made it to the main area of the street and kept walking. I lazily started thinking about a bunch of different things. Like why Michael decided to leave me alone at the party. Or why I decided to listen to Michael's idiotic idea of leaving my phone in his car, so I couldn't call him or anyone else. I started cursing myself for being so careless with my drinking and even getting drunk, knowing I shouldn't have done that. I stopped walking on the side of the road because I was getting tired and crossed my arms over my chest tightly to keep myself warm. Then I remembered something I could do. Hitchhiking. I held out my arm and stuck out my thumb, hoping someone else could see me. I watched as a couple of cars drove past me, but they wouldn't stop. As minutes ticked by, I started feeling uneasy, thinking I would have to start walking again. It was past 1 in the morning, and there were a few cars driving past me, but no one was stopping because they either didn't notice me or didn't care. I hesitated and thought about walking home again. But I realized that in my drunken state, it would be too daunting. I was still holding out my thumb when a grey truck pulled up and stopped in front of me. I smiled as I stumbled toward the vehicle. The window rolled down, and an older-looking man with a beard asked me if I needed a ride. I told him yes, and then told him where my house was before getting into the truck, feeling grateful for the ride. As we started driving down the road, the man started trying to make small talk with me, asking what happened to me. However, I was too disoriented to have an actual conversation with him. The only things I could manage to say were low mumbles or just murmurs and groans. As we turned the corner to my street, away from the party, I started feeling uneasy. For some reason, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was strange about this man. Suddenly, we drove past my house. I told the man that we had just driven past it, and I felt my gut telling me to get out. But I couldn't, because I was too drunk to move. I was about to tell the man to let me out before we got too far away from my house, when suddenly the man turned to me, and I noticed he had a sinister look on his face. You know, you shouldn't be drunk while you're hitchhiking because you'd make a very easy target, the man said, smirking darkly. The man reached over and started rubbing my leg, and I didn't know what he was trying to do, but I knew it probably wasn't anything good. Before he could do anything else to me, we both heard a loud siren behind the car, and then a flashing red and blue light flooded the night. I realized it was the police, and I jumped for joy inside. The man panicked and stopped, unlocking the doors, which allowed me to jump out of the car. I ran as fast as I could, and the police officer rushed over to me. I told him the entire story about what happened to me. Unfortunately, nothing illegal had happened per se. The police officer told me that he was looking for someone in a grey truck who had apparently stolen something from a store. I'm not sure if it was the man who picked me up was someone else. But I was just glad the police officer stopped the car. The cop gave me a ride home, and I decided from there on that I wouldn't get so drunk that I couldn't think straight. I now know the importance of being responsible and staying aware of my surroundings, even when having a good time.